finally you get back to 1907. And there's no doubt around here they were here. Chris had a real interesting little thing I've got on that slide changer from 1844 here in Arkansas, and it tells about them going out and seeing real large Ozark Chinquapins, nuts everywhere, and real large beech trees, and later on they were all cut down. And so AJ found this. This is from 1879, and this is from in Missouri. So he's talking about from the Missouri River south, east going, and he talks about a rock chestnut. And this guy was used to only chestnut trees, and I thought that was kind of an interesting one. So from pollen analysis, we know that the biggest concentration of Castanea, which this would be primarily the American chestnut, and just like what Mark said, it's going to be in Appalachia area. But you see pollen, though, in other areas, and your prevailing winds are west and east. And if you look at Chinquapin pollen, and if you look at Allegheny pollen and the pollen of American chestnut, it's pretty hard to tell apart, isn't it, Mark? They all look really, really close. And I've looked at them, and it'd probably take a more powerful microscope than I've got to find it, but it can be, it looks really close to each other. So this tree is really important for wildlife and people, and it's a keystone species. And if you look at these leaves off this Ozark Chinquapin, this is in Oregon County, Missouri, which is in southeast Missouri, which modern tree books don't show them. And we found probably around 800 so far. Where's Russ at? So about 800 trees, I guess, or sprouts?
Oh, over 600.
600, okay. And there's probably more out there too, possibly. But these are just surviving sprouts. So if you show someone in the eastern U.S. these leaves, what do you think they would call that? They'd say it's American chestnut. It looks just like it. And so they're a real close cousin to each other. And so if you look, and a few things we found out a little bit different, I'm going to tell you a little bit later on about this tree. And one of them is the leaf morphology, how the leaves look. And this is not written in books anywhere. We're going to be sharing with you some things that we've never told anybody else before. So y'all are privy to this. Share it if you want to. And I always say information is like manure, spread it around so it can do some good in a garden. And so below the Arkansas River, the trees there, your native population of them, the leaves will be smaller, and the stems for same age growth trees will be smaller. Above the Arkansas River, though, they will have much larger leaves. And east of the Mississippi River in Alabama and in Mississippi, the leaves will tend to be smaller there as well too. So this thing made a consistent nut crop every year. Real high protein food for wildlife and humans. Large nut crop every year. And real rocky, dry cherry soil. And very drought tolerant. And as far as the soil goes, we found out over a period of decades that the pH of the soil does not matter with Ozark Chinquapins. Books say that, but it does not matter. The number one criteria is for it to be on well-drained soil. And we have Ozark Chinquapins growing in Connecticut. We have them growing in Nebraska. Some of them are on real high alkaline pH soil. We have them growing in Michigan. They can survive below 20, below zero winters. So there's a lot of things that books say that may not necessarily be correct. And I'm not trying to beat up on what they wrote. A lot of that was written after the Chinquapins were already gone. So you have to put it in that kind of context. Blooms in late May, early June. Wood very rot resistant. Produces nuts in 3 to 5 years. That's something we did not know before we started doing this. And there's places where it was at, the numbers were real high. And I don't know if you can call it dominant, but that little window, that area right below the slope of the hill, not on top of it, but right where the hill drops down, there's like a band. And I've seen where those trees will grow below it, and you'll think, oh, well, they can, nuts roll downhill, squirrels bury in there, and you think, well, it can grow on the hillside lower. And then you have real heavy flood rains, and then they will all die within a week, all those that made it. So a lot of interesting things. This is not Photoshop, it's 101 degrees that day. And I burned up a lot of shoe leather like a lot of people here and driven a lot of miles doing this. This is a trunk. And this is in Oregon County, and me and Russ were up where this place was at, and there was a wildfire came through here and burned this trunk except for the butt ends of it that are charred. So when you have a fire you lose the evidence of those. And that one chestnut in Connecticut was out in the pasture, so there's no fire there, so that one was able to survive. So I started trying to look for these trees, and I started contacting people, and I kept running into this time and time again. And you got to remember, at one time, I didn't know what I know, and we all were that way. We learn new information. And how many of y'all ever heard of tectonic plates? Anybody ever heard of that? Okay. A guy by the name of Albert Wegener came up with that theory in the 1920s in Germany. And when I was in high school, I think I still got one of my old books. They say the reason why there's fossilized plants like ferns in Antarctica is because the axis just kind of shifted. Well, Albert Wegener came up with a theory of tectonic plates that the continents are constantly moving. He could not prove that, so nobody believed him. Well, guess what? In the 1960s and 70s, we had radar imagery that shows that you can see it from outer space. And by George, he's right. So now they changed the books. So you get new information that changes what you thought at one time. And so with this tree, we're doing it too. So this is what I was told, and I listened to them, but I'm kind of stubborn on stuff like this, and I'll keep looking. And I knew from what I knew about history and science, it's really rare for any disease or pathogen to kill 100% of anything. And, everybody in this room are survivors. Your ancestors survived every disease, every thing that came along, every war. And so it's rare for something to kill out 100% of the population. But then if we were all hybrid corn, we were all exactly the same, you could introduce a disease here. If it killed you, it killed you. But it doesn't work that way. So a disease will come up and, you may just get sick. Somebody else may die. Some may not even be affected. Some may be affected more than others. And that's the way a lot of pathogens and diseases work. So this is the first tree I found, and this is up near the Arkansas-Missouri border. And here's another one. This is in southwest Missouri. And there's a fire in this area. And I wish I had that other tree here, but you can see fire burn marks. And this Ozark Chinquapin, they heal very quickly and grow quickly. And that tree kind of stood out. I wish Tim was here with me. He took that photo and it really stood out. So in Blount County, Alabama, that's what I was trying to think of, I was contacted by the American Chestnut Chapter in Alabama and in Tennessee, and they said that they cross-pollinated their best American chestnut, a clapper, with this tree. And they were getting one nut per burr, and they didn't know why. So they called me up. Long story short, I drove all the way down there, and it was Ozark Chinquapin. And they made a mistake. They told me that tree was 21 inches diameter, and it was supposed to be 21 inches circumference. And so if I'd known that, I'd never got down there. We usually don't add trees this small to our database, usually. So anyhow, so here's some more. That's Howell County, Missouri. That guy had it on his land, didn't even know it was even there. And here's Tim Smith. Tim Smith is like me, he likes food real well. And so this tree was about a 12-inch tree, and so for about 2 months, we had the state champion there. And Shane, you'll raise your hand up, where's he at? This is a tree that Shane found for us, and it was right by a horse camp, and people were cutting branches off of it and everything, no blight on it whatsoever, but blight was in the forest. And Shane and I went to pollinate this tree, and we don't have the genetics of this tree because it died right after that from heat. And Shane, do you care to tell what happened on the way over there? Do what happened?
When I found the tree.
No, what happened when you and I were going to get pollen and pollinate that tree?
Oh, that's the one I got T-boned in my truck while we were driving to that.
Yes. So things like that happen. So every one that we find, we can't always do something with it. But that tree there, though, Shane went to a lot of work, and it was recycled. Kelly and Donna, raise your hands up. This is the tree where your dulcimer came from. And y'all will be able to not only see that some of that wood, you'll be able to hear that wood for a little bit. I'm not going to run it for you. And here's another one. This is Oregon County, and it's me and Russ down there. Here's a meeting that we had. We came down to Ponca Elk Education Center. And you see all of us, we find these trees, we've got big smiles on our face. You'd think we'd shot a Pope and Young or Boone and Crockett deer, with the big grins that we've got. And here's Chris White, and that's a tree he's got on his property. Here's another one. This one is in southwest Missouri, And this tree was 23 years old, right about when that photo was made. And by accident, it was cut down by the line crew. And so that tree would have been lost, but if it weren't for the work we were doing, this tree is really well represented. And so all this work we're doing is saving genetics of these trees. Here's a state champion of Mississippi. And here's another one in southwest Missouri that we pollinated. And here's Shane with another one a little bit bigger than that. It's kind of got a double branch. Blighted pretty bad, but that tree even today has still got one branch on, still making nuts. Just incredible. And this is one from East Texas. And here's another one from Arkansas. And this one I think I may have, that's two photos of the same tree right here. So some of them are pretty good size. And so our goal is, we're an organization of outdoor men and women, and we don't want to lose what was once this important tree of our Ozark forest. And our goal is to restore the tree back to its native range. And we're working to establish a viable seed base through research, cross-pollination, surviving trees to develop a 100% pure Ozark Chinquapin that is blight resistant. And right now we have trees that appear to have resistance to it, but until you actually inoculate that tree with the blight, you don't know for sure. And so that's what we're in the process of doing now. Seed are available to anyone who wants to help reestablish the tree to its native range. And I like the stern look on Eddie Estes' face right here. Here's an Ozark Chinquapin he had, and ask him how he got his award. I'm not going to ruin it for you. Eddie, where are you at? Okay, there we go, back here. And so here's a recovery action plan, finding surviving trees throughout the range. And so you here in this room, if you know where one's at, get with us, especially if it's larger than 10 inches, 12 inches, 16. The larger, the better, the more blight in that forest, the better also. So we're collecting seed, pollen, and grafts, and we're preserving the genetics from them. And not only from the ones that show like levels of resistance or appear to, but also all of them. You never can tell when you may need to go back and get something from the genetic gene pool. We're cross-pollinating surviving trees, and we're inoculating the finished crosses with the blight to see how they react to it. And we're doing science and genetics and hypovirulence, raising public awareness, like this meeting that we're having here today, and raise money for projects. And I think it's safe to say until just very recently here, we've been operating on a shoestring budget, almost no money at all. But that doesn't stop us from trying to do what we can do. And dedicated locations in and outside of the blight range. And as far as saving the seed, Matthew Albrecht, where are you at? Back in the back here. Matthew's with Missouri Botanical Garden. He's also on our board. And here a few years ago, they actually were able to freeze with, I guess, nitrogen, is that correct? Seed. And then they thawed them out later, at a later time. And voila, some of them sprouted. So that's another way of actually preserving the genetics of this. And so we're going to be sending him some more seed, and I'll make sure you get some, but not from this year. It's going to be fresh that we're doing it. This is our second meeting. I put first meeting on it. Actually, that is the first one. This one is at Harrison, Arkansas. And that was back in 2007. And that was our first people that we had working on it. And some of these same people are still here with us today. So that's a pretty good thing. So it's kind of like a higher calling, making a difference. And I was talking to some people yesterday that said, everybody doing all this, and it would include everybody in this room, they're not doing it for the money. They're doing this because they want to do something good. And they know that if they have the power to make a difference on it. So that's pretty impressive by itself. And so I've got a lot of people that have helped me out, and I don't know if they learned anything, but these are former students of mine when I was teaching school. So they still come out and help me cut trees and put plots in. And we put this plot in at Green Forest School. That's before we do. They don't grow good in grass, and they do not like humus. They need rocky, well-drained soil that has very little, if any at all, organic matter in the soil. So we've been doing research work, and we've got the research farm now. We've been working on hypovirulence. Plots outside. Did somebody have a question? Okay. And plots outside of the blight range, and we're trying to identify resistance in them, and we've been doing some work on genetics too. And if you ever wonder where the color chestnut comes from, there you go. And so these are some pollination efforts, and before we first started doing this, it was really work intensive. And I can still remember Chris White and Sean Smith and some of their family being out, way out in the woods. And we pulled up there after dark. I was bringing pollen from some big trees in Missouri. And they had flashlights. Some of them were up in tree branches sitting up there with strings. And they were pulling up pollen. They were pollinating these female flowers. And just a lot of Herculean effort to actually do it. So what have we learned about these trees? And I was loading in some stuff last night, and I realized after I loaded, I had some things I didn't even put on there. And I'll tell you one thing. The American chestnut, they had trouble before with an invasive oriental gall wasp. Am I saying that correctly? And so they've done studies and tests. They found out that of all things, the Chinese chestnut is immune to this. And so they also found out through tests and field work that the Ozark Chinquapin is also immune to it. So we've got a better tree than we ever thought. Another one is back at the Meadowview Farm. I had Fred Hebard call me up, and at that particular time they'd lost 80,000 of their best American chestnuts by a disease, Phytophthora cinnamoma. It's called black ink disease or ink rot disease. And he was calling me, asking me if we had any issues with it. Well, I called around, and I've never seen a problem with it. And but the problem is that the reason we don't have to deal with it is because Ozark Chinquapins can only grow in well-drained soil. And that's not where the black ink disease thrives at. You've got to have a little bit more compaction, more moisture, and so we just don't have the habitat for them. This is done by A.J. Hendershot. It's a real good map of the spread of the blight. And he included the American chestnut, the Allegheny, and the Ozark. And we've got some new areas that we can add here in Alabama that we know where those are at too. We've got to update that particular map. This is Mike Fiona in the back. Mike, you want to raise your hands so everybody sees where you're at back there? And so we found out some interesting stuff. We had no way of knowing that after like year 3, these trees would produce nuts and pollen the second year. I just still can't get over that. And we have all kinds of hitchhikers that come over because of we have a proliferation of trade and travel. People can go everywhere a lot easier, and like chronic wasting disease we're dealing with right now has probably helped a little bit, I'd say, because of the travel that we have. And so, Chris, this is an oak. Am I saying this right? Oak leaf. Where's Chris at? Chris White. Okay. Am I saying this right? An oak leaf borer. Is that right?
I'm not sure about that.
They love chestnut leaves. A little bit more rest, I probably would be able to say it correctly, though. When you bring back a species, you have some different things that happen. And I took a group of people out to look at some plots that we had. And this northern perula was going to town eating all the insects that were eating the leaves. So when you bring a new species back, things change. And so all this work we're doing, we're finding out all kinds of unique things. And so this is a shot of pollen catkins. And these are female flowers. And they're only viable to be pollinated in a real short little window of time of about 2 days, give or take. And so we found out a lot of things we didn't know. And with the American chestnut, when they pollinate them, they'll put a bag over the female flowers so no other pollen can get in there. And then they remove it later on, they pollinate it and put the bag back on it. Well, with the Ozark Chinquapin, you can't do that. If you'll look right here, the tree grows beyond that. And so we were killing the branches every time we were trying to do this. So let's see, where is Steve Churchill at? So Steve, by accident, we found out that the cheap bags, right, is a way to go, and that they need to be quiet. That way the tree can still photosynthesize and keep this growing. And so we didn't know that. We learned it, and Steve was able to take some pollen, did some of the first work that we did. So as we're getting more and more trees in these plots making pollen, we're finding out some really interesting things. Used to, we'd only get about 1 nut per burr, or per cluster of burrs, because there wasn't that much pollen. Then we started getting more pollen, where we're getting 1 nut per burr. Now we're getting plenty of pollen, and we're beginning to see where we're having not one, but sometimes 2, 3, 4, 5, sometimes even 6 nuts per burr. And that's something we've not counted on. And that's something I went back and looked at other books, and they say only about 1% or 3% of the time this will happen. You got to remember, a lot of that was written later, though. And so the same trees that we were getting 1 nut per burr, now they got more pollen, and this is what we're seeing. Right. So with all this extra pollen, you're getting a lot more nuts, and these are about to open up right here. And once they get to this stage, the game is on. The squirrels are after them. Crows will try to pluck them out. Everything goes after it. And so turkeys love them too. And so it's good food for lots of wildlife. This is a real good shot of Shane. This is a large tree that we had a picture of before, and that's a seedling from it. And I've noticed some of these seedlings will die of blight as they get older and some won't. And we found out that when you're planting these trees, you better put a grow tube around it or it will get eaten. Me and Mike Fione found that out a long time ago. And we planted, I think, about 16 trees. We ran out of grow tubes, and so we were planting these good seed. We were real carefully piling rocks around them so they'd come up. And then we came back a little bit later, and it looked like a carrot had been pulled out of the ground. The deer came along and just grabbed it, pulled them up, and ate it, roots and everything. So, and it took a while to get enough nuts, but we did some protein analysis. And growing up, I'd always told around here the white oak was the #1 tree for mass that deer and turkeys and squirrels went after. But look at the protein though that you have in the Ozark Chinquapin. And here's scarlet oak, which is pretty common around here too. And here's American chestnut, and I got this, the reason it says 5 to 8%. I talked to, let's see, that'd be Professor Fulbright. He told me over the phone. He said, I like going by whole numbers. And he didn't know the others, so I didn't put it on there though. A lot of trace minerals, it's really off the hook as far as that goes. Magnesium, there's a lot of people have magnesium deficiencies, and they're really good. You can look at the fats and the carbohydrates. And the carbohydrates are your starches and your sugars. So when you eat one of these nuts over here, that real sweet flavor that you're getting is from the sugars and the carbohydrates. But it's really on up there on a little bit of everything. Without putting everybody in a coma, this is a DNA study that was done. It was a joint effort that was done back in 1999. They released it in 2000. And so they say here that the mean genetic diversity of surviving Ozark Chinquapin populations is 0.227, was found to be greater than that of the relic American chestnut, even though its range at the present time is limited to the Ozark Mountains. We know now it's a larger one though. But if you look at these numbers for comparison, here's going to be your number they assign for the American chestnut, and this is the Chinese chestnut, and so the Ozark falls kind of right in between. And so,
what does that mean? What does that mean? What is that?
Good question, yeah. And I'm covering a lot. If you don't care, let me grab a drink of water right here, because I can tell it's starting to dry out just a little bit. Okay, so your question was, what does that mean? And really good question. So in genetics, the more genetic diversity you have, generally speaking, it means the species has been around a little bit longer. It's an older species. And so what that means is it probably has more resistance to disease and pathogens. That's what you're looking at. And so the Chinese chestnut has the best immunity to the chestnut blight. And on the very bottom level, the pure American chestnut is real susceptible to blight. So the Ozark Chinquapin, what this study is saying, is falling somewhere in between. I just now recognize you got a beard there. How you doing? And so that's what that actually means. So, does that answer your question all right? Okay, and so moving along here, and if somebody, let's see, where do you go to? Steve, how are we doing on time right now?
There we go. We've got a little after 10, a couple minutes.
It's what now?
A couple minutes after 10.
Okay, better hurry up then. Okay. Okay, so this one, this is some more analysis that was done. This is the other castanea, which includes not only the American chestnut, but European, Chinese, and Japanese chestnuts. And look at where our native chestnut falls compared to those. And this is on your total fats compared to the others. The other study I showed you was mainly comparing other trees in the, Quercus, the oaks. And so this is compared to other chestnuts. So if you look down here on the bottom, on the protein, And I'm going to tell you, wildlife can smell this, and they know what has the highest protein, and that's what they go after. And we've had all kinds of fits trying to plant these, and we'll go back. It doesn't matter if it's a week later or a day later, and they will be gone because they're dug up and they're eaten. So deer will step over white oaks and red oaks, and we've actually got film and video footage of that this year that will do it to eat the nuts off of this tree. And so here's another DNA study that's done by Joey Shaw. And kind of interestingly, this is Pomelo, which is Allegheny. This is Denta, which is the American chestnut. And his study shows that those two are more closely related to each other than they are over here to the Ozark Chinquapin. And this is a mix right here. This is a difference, a mixture possibly foreign chestnut or castanea in with maybe Pomelo, which is Allegheny, or American chestnut. So without going into too much detail. So he says here, Ozark Chinquapins also appear to have more genetic variability than the American chestnut, possibly the Allegheny, depending on your circumstances. And so Leslie, a little bit later on, is going to tell us a little bit more. And I didn't snag any pictures, any real big ones, but we've got all kinds of photos. And some of these trees, we were counting the nuts off of. Some trees, 17 feet tall. One of them, I think we've got 3,611 nuts off of it. And I thought, that is really good. And I started seeing these videos of the squirrels and the deer and turkeys eating them. I'm like, well, maybe there's a lot more than that. So anyhow, right behind us, all these fallen trees. This is another plot right here on trail cameras. That thing didn't turn out very plain. On trail cameras, I would see only like maybe one turkey or two every so often. Now we have flocks of them coming in, and they know where to get the good food at. And so we found out also, this is from 2012, and so a lot of us that do forest fire, and I know National Park Service does a lot as well too, and we were on pins and needles in 2012 because we had higher heat and drought conditions and lower fuel moisture than they did in the Rocky Mountains. And so this was a really, really bad year on all trees and people as well. So how did the Ozark Chinquapins do when this happened? Okay, they tried to get out of here. No, they can't do it. They've got to stay there. So this picture I took right here is actually on the plot. And I was in the shade. If I remember correctly, the temperature was about 103 degrees. And if you look at this thermometer, it bottomed out at 121 degrees on the shaded side. And you can look around and see all the burnt vegetation up here. But look at this tree. And this is the first one we successfully created by crossing two pure Ozark Chinquapins that appear to have some level of resistance. And this very tree today, no matter what the weather is, it makes nuts before all the other Chinquapins do. And usually the first week of September, and they're always large. So this thing is clawing and fighting to spread its seed out. And so we started putting in these research plots, and we usually don't tell anybody where they're at. And so we've got them scattered around, and as other people make the presentations, you're going to find out a little bit more. And I think that Shane went up in that tree before we had much money. So we've been doing hypovirulence, we've been doing leaf analysis, assay, where you can find out whether or not a tree actually has levels of resistance to the blight. And that's a picture from the lip bud. I think Shane may have taken that one. And so we've been sending out seed, and until just the last 2 years, I was doing most of that myself. And you'll find out a little bit more about it. And I handwrite a note to every person. And I hate to mail anything. If you get something from me, it was a lot of effort. And so along the way, too, we presented awards. That's Shane back in the back. Shane, not very many people know it, but he came all the way up from Dallas. He drove from Houston to Dallas, correct? Got on the plane and came up here. We've got some folks here today from New York. We also have one from Georgia. And so education outreach is a big thing where you try to tell people about all this. And Becky, do you care to raise your hand up? This is our secretary. She couldn't be here last night, but she's here today. And so a lot of really good stuff. And so there's the end product. So the course we've got today are different from what we used to have, but if we all work together, we can make it better for our children and wildlife to inherit. And this next picture coming up is my little son, who knows more about Ozark Chinquapins than any little kid I know of today. And that's me with the bear cub right there. Okay, Okay, that's that presentation. And I'll try to take some questions, and I went a little bit too long, I guess, and I'll try to answer some. Yes.
Steve, does it matter what color the tree shelter is? Because I
Let me
know.
walk around so I can hear a little bit better. I've got stopped up here.
I'm sorry, Steve. Does it matter what color the tree shelter is? Because, they're pushing out all
Good
these
question,
various
yeah.
different colors of tree shelter.
I've tried all the cheapest ones you can get, and U.S. Forestry, we've got a memorandum agreement with them, and to save money, they keep buying those blue plastic ones. Those are the worst ones. It's like putting your hand in a plastic bag and leaving it there all day. The best ones are like what we showed on the picture. They're expensive. They're about $6 a piece, and they are the 2X tree shelters. They have a patent on them, and those things I've got pictures of trees in the wintertime in December, the snow on the ground. They're still growing in it. They're still green. And so they protect it. And the most important thing, though, that tube does is it keeps the deer from browsing it. And it's like a chimney. It will literally wick that aroma of all that protein up. And so I've watched squirrels go right by. And if you got a wire cage, they'll come in there and they'll dig up and they'll eat that nut on that little tree. But if you've got a 2X tree shelter, they can't smell it. And so that makes the difference on. That's just what I've seen. Good question, too. Somebody else had a question?
If someone,
Who was next? Let's see, I'll do you since I'm right here.
Okay, what percentage of those nuts did you flash frozen nitrogen describe that?
Here's a person that asked that.
I think, I don't have the exact number, but the vast majority of them did.
Wow, very good, very good. And that is something that, he had privy to do, and, if you want to try to save genetics, that's the way to go. So we had a board meeting last night, and we're going to be getting him some more nuts. So good question, though. And somebody over here, yes, I'm going to step around here so I can hear you better.
What exposure do you put your test blocks on?
Oh, very good question. I've found them in the wild growing on north slope, south slope, east, west, a little bit of everything, but the best that we found so far, and I think everybody would agree with this, is usually the south aspect. And if you do it that way, you have to cut less timber too, because it will track the sun better. And so the more sunlight you get on those branches, the quicker you will get female flowers and also. Yeah, so some of the exposure works the best. And then some people think, well, on a blade, not on a blade, but right above a blade is a really good habitat. It's that little sweet spot, and it's kind of like a band around the hill, if you will. And so if you, they'll grow in other places too. I've got a picture, and I didn't put it on this slide, but I have one tree on one of our research plots, and every tree around it is about half the size of the other trees because it blocks out part of the sun. And they will grow. I've got some of them growing in very little sunlight, and it takes them a lot longer, but we're trying to accelerate moving this along. So we're trying to optimize growing conditions for them so we can get those seeds that turn around quicker. But ideally on the southeast slope, yes, ma'am.
Regarding the pollination, so are trees either male or female, or they have both male and female, and just need two trees?
You have to have two. They cannot self-pollinate. And I've heard before that maybe, possibly, every time we check, we've always found another one, though. They just won't do it. You have to have another one for them. You have to have at least two. So we send out seed. We never send less than two. Now, I think last year we sent 12. This year maybe more like 5, something like that.
So each tree has male and female on it?
Yes,
And you get the
but it cannot self-pollinate. Yes. And we also found out too, if you get about 100 feet away from the pollinator, the number of seed drops drastically, really quick. And so there's like a sweet spot. So since we've lost these trees, we don't have the amount of pollen that we used to. And so if it's close by, you can get a whole lot more nuts. You get plenty of pollen, and you're going to start seeing inside that balloon ovules, several of them will actually set a seed in those as well too. Good question.